everyone, welcome to episode 27 of Berry Fun Adventures. My name is Tanya and I am coming to you from southeast Minnesota, where my family and I run Firefly Berries, which is a fruit farm specializing in strawberries, Concord grapes, and naturally dyed yarn. So thanks so much for coming to be with me again as I share all my crafty adventures. And if you are new to the channel and to this podcast, thanks so much for coming to check us out. If you are new, or even if you're not, and you are not a subscriber, if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so that it will get out there and help other people find what I'm sharing. So it has been only 2 weeks since I have come to you last. I am no longer in fruit season, which makes it a lot easier to come to you on a more regular basis. It has been really warm here in Minnesota it's cold today, but over the last couple days, earlier in the week, we were in the 60s and even the 70s, which for late October, early November is super warm. So some of you have been here to this podcast before, know that I homeschool my kids. And because of that, it was so nice out. I was like, we have to be outside enjoying this weather. So we didn't do as much school this week as we maybe normally would, but that's right, we'll catch up. Instead, we were outside and we were doing some spring pruning that we normally do in the spring, but were able to do because the weather was so nice. And then we also had some time to just enjoy the weather together. So all that in mind, I've actually done a fair bit of knitting, considering also, side note, the dynamics in our house have been a little crazy the last 2 weeks since I came to you last. My husband and I have 4 cats in our family. We have 4 cats, and 2 of them are 12 years old. 1 is 6, and 1 is only 6 months. And I've always had cats for the last 22 years, almost 23 years. But never have we had this experience where they get like a stomach bug, like when you have kids who go to school and they get a stomach bug. But our older cat had gone to go get a dental cleaning in his teeth. And I think he brought some kind of germ back with him from the vet because my 2 youngest kitties got sick with some sort of like stomach throw up bug. And of course they're like toddlers. They don't know where it is appropriate to throw up and where it isn't. So we had about a week of like cat drama. And then our older kitty was diagnosed with hyperthyroidism. So that was a drama of trying to get his medicine in him. So I didn't do as much knitting in the beginning of the 2 weeks since I've been away, but I have kind of picked up the pace recently. And you will see sometimes when I come to you, I have, 5 or 8 projects. Like last time, I think I did have like 8 projects. This time I only have, I think, 3 whips and 1 big finished object, and then a little one that my 10-year-old and I actually just worked on and finished this morning. So let's start there with finished objects. You'll see the elephant in the room. You might notice if you were watching my last episode, my Louisiana sweater by Petite Knit, and I'm kind of close to the camera, so it's going to be hard to see, but it kind of cuts me in a nice spot on my hips, and it has this really cozy fold-over neckband, and the sleeve there's no sleeve decreases is what I'm trying to say, and then there's just some rapid ones right at the end. So it is so cozy, and I love it so much. I'll put in a better picture of me from farther away so you can actually see what I look like and what the sweater looks like. But I knit it it is a pattern that I believe it's bulky or super bulky yarn. The pattern is a paid-for pattern on Ravelry. The designer recommends you use a US size 13 needle for the main body and I think 11 for the ribbing and the neck, the turtleneck neckline. And I used a 9 and an 11, but I held, instead of having like super bulky 1 strand of yarn, I actually held 2 strands of Wool of the Andes non-superwash double. And it worked out perfect. The gauge was perfect for me. And I really love doing that. I think it's a great way to use up what you have in your stash when you hold them together like that. So, if you don't have something and you're looking at a pattern, see if you can maybe hold something double or sometimes even triple. And then you can use what you have and either have the same color. Like I was lucky enough that I had purchased a large quantity of this particular yarn for a worsted weight coat that I actually made out of something else. But, if you don't have the same color, you can always marl it, using two different colors. And sometimes, even if you have a really vibrant skein of yarn that maybe you don't love as much now as you did when you first purchased it, if you pair it with something a little more muted, it will tone down that color and it'll allow you to use up that yarn in a way that you will still love the finished product. So I love the Louisiana sweater. In fact, kind of a funny thing is my husband, I knit him his first sweater a couple episodes ago. I shared it with you. It was the So Basic sweater by Maxim Sear. And originally he gets hot a lot. So he was like, oh, I don't want anything too thick. I'll get too hot. But then he likes the sweater that I made him. But that sweater is a little more, I would say it has more of a dressy or dress up kind of feel to it, just because it is sport weight and it's a little more fitted. And when he saw that I made this sweater, he was like, oh, I really like how that fabric looks. He didn't use those words, I don't think. He just said, I like how that looks. And what he meant is he liked the thickness of the fabric and he liked the loose fitting of the sweater. So I think I'm actually, stay tuned, but I'm going to get him some, what did I say this was again? Wool of the Andes. I'm going to get him some in a different color. And I'm going to make this exact pattern, but I'm going to take the collar and I'm going to change it. He didn't want the turtleneck collar. I'm just going to do like a basic, like 1.5 inch knit one, purl one ribbing for the collar. But I'm going to keep, because it's just a simple, you can see my increases here. The raglan increases are, similar to any other, this is a very, I would say a very unisex pattern. It, no matter what gender you identify as or don't identify as, I think it would really work for most people. So anyway, stay tuned for that. There may be more to come in the Louisiana sweater world for me. And then the other finished object I have today is actually kind of a weird object, but my 10-year-old and I, we do art every Friday. And so today is Friday, so we did art today. And lately I've been choosing some different, we don't use a particular curriculum, I just kind of pick projects, and he really just likes to work with his hands and create something, whether it be painting or, we do use different, like sometimes we just go get dried leaves outside and you turn it into confetti and you make a landscape with it. So anyway, that could be a whole nother conversation. But today we learned finger knitting together. And finger knitting, for those of you who've never done it before, I actually have never done it before. My oldest child did it when, I want to say he was about Lincoln's age, so like 4th or 5th, 6th grade. And when you do finger knitting, you're using your hands. So basically, if you've ever done loom knitting before, you kind of weave in and out of those pegs on the loom, and then you take the bottom strand and you go over the top strand. So that's basically the same thing with finger knitting, except you're using your fingers. So we learned finger knitting this morning by watching a video. It is a YouTube channel called Fiberflux, Flux, and it was episode 80. I will link it below if you are interested in trying it or interested in having your kids try it. But what happens is it creates this long rope-like structure because in essence you only have 4 stitches across because you only have 4 fingers. I mean, technically you probably could use your thumb, but I'm not exactly sure how that would work. But this style that we did was just the 4 fingers. So you get kind of this long rope, and I think I took a picture of that, so I'll put that in. And then you take the rope, and you can see what I did. I swirled it around, so it started here, and then I sewed it in. You can kind of see where I sewed it in on the back. I sewed them together like a big rope, or like a rope basket. That's also something Lincoln and I are going to learn later this year. But I sewed it together with a big tapestry needle, and then I'm just going to give this to my cats. I'm going to put it in one of their cat condo little areas. You know, they get kind of, after a while, the carpet gets kind of squished down. It's not very comfy. So we're just going to put this right inside there, and they'll have a little squishy, warm, little blanket-like mat to lay on. And this, I used the Lion brand Woolies Thick and Quick. I believe, at least that's what this was. I'm not 100% certain if this was like, I don't know what the variety or what it's called. I know it's Lion brand, but it might have even been a little bit thicker than the Thick and Quick. So anyway, yeah, that was kind of our fun little project. The downside to it, I will say, if you try finger knitting, is that you have to keep your hand open like this the whole time. And I don't know, maybe I was just too tense, but I felt like a lot of pain in my wrist. It didn't feel super comfortable in my wrist because you have to keep your hand open. And you can't finish your project is not finished until you get to the end. So you can't like set it down very easily. Although I did mention to my son, who was getting tired of doing it, that he could, put a pencil in the middle of the 4 stitches and just kind of lay it down in a safe place and then pick it back up. I think that would be pretty easy to do, but it is, your fingers are like the needle, so that's a little trickier. But yeah, so that was my fun morning project. I guess it wasn't really morning. It was like late morning. We did it around lunchtime. So I want to say it took an hour and a half or something. Hour maybe for us to, hour and a half probably for us to learn it and for me to do enough rope to make this little mat for the cats. So yeah, finger knitting. I don't really have a pattern. It's just, I'll link that episode from that YouTube channel down below. Okay, so that's it for finished objects. Let's move on to works in progress. I actually only have 3. 2 I would have talked about last week, so I've made some progress on each of those. The first one is the vibrant cowl, I'm calling, that I'm making for my 17-year-old son. And this one, if you were here for the last episode, you will remember. I can't remember where it was. I certainly wasn't this far. But this is a long, it's getting pretty long now. It's making my lighting go weird. It's going to be a long tube that is double wrapped around his neck. And I am knitting this on a US 2 circular Chowgu needle. I think it is I want to say it's a 12-inch. Pretty sure it's a 12-inch, 12 or 16-inch. And then the yarn that I'm using is 3 different yarns. This first one here with the speckly. So back up. Just a reminder, if you are new or if you don't remember, this I am not using a pattern for. I'm just making it up myself because it's not very complicated. You simply do a crochet provisional cast on, and I did 80 stitches. And I'm a loose knitter, so depending on your knitting gauge, anywhere between 80 and 100 stitches, and also like how wide you like it to be, but anywhere between 80 and 100 stitches is a good cast on number. So you get those needles going, and then I did 5 rows. I have this in-between color. You can kind of see right here. 5 rows here, 5 rows here, and then I have larger chunks. So the in-between color is a sock blank from all dyed up fibers. It kind of has a tie-dyed look to it. So that for the in-between color. So I did 5 rows of that, and then my 2 main colors are, this one is Black Cat Fibers, and this is, I think it's called David Bowie, I'm pretty sure. So it's kind of fun. It has like 20% cashmere in it, so it's quite soft. And then the other one is this fun sheepy sock blank with sparkle in it from Gail's Art. So it's coming along. I think I got to the, I'm gonna put that back in there. I got to the halfway point because I have another cowl that I really love that I made last year with my Advent Countdown kit. But I really like the size of that one. It's not super long. That, you know, I like it when you wrap it, that 2 wraps around stays kind of close to your neck and it's not too drapey, because in Minnesota here it's quite cold in the winter, so you don't want a lot of air in there, but you don't want it so tight that it feels like you're choking. And that one, the length, I really liked a lot. I'll have to measure it and see exactly how long it is. But wait, I can measure it right now. So I put here it is. So I put a little stitch marker in here, and that's kind of the halfway point. So let me measure real quick and see what it says. Sorry for the noise. So it's about a little more than 26 inches. So halfway is about 26 inches. So that means it'll be about 52 inches when it's fully done. So this is my halfway point. So I don't have too much farther to go, I guess. I mean, okay, who am I kidding? It's quite a ways yet. But it is pretty simple knitting. My 10-year-old wanted to watch Hocus Pocus 2 this last week for Halloween. So, you know, if I'm watching stuff like that, I can knit while I'm doing that, or if I'm, sometimes he reads out loud to me for school, so I can just knit around and around while I listen to him. So, yeah, so it's 5 rows, 15, 5 rows, 15, and then I just keep repeating it. But that is going well. I really, really would love that to be finished in the next 2 weeks. That is definitely a goal. I have another cowl that I would love to cast on. My 17-year-old son and my husband both have birthdays right around Thanksgiving, and I would really love to make my husband a cowl too. So maybe next time I come to you, I'll have 2 finished cowls. One never knows, I guess. Sometimes, you know, you cast on things and then you go, right? Like sometimes the spirit moves you and you just really want to knit only on that one thing. Generally, I'm not a monogamous knitter. I generally have multiple projects, but a couple multiple projects is good. It's when you get more than a couple. Okay, so the next work in progress, I of course am halfway through the row. So let me knit on this while I tell you about it. So this is a cozy garter stitch blanket, and it is not super complicated. So I'm again not using a pattern. I simply made it up myself because, you know, a garter stitch, it's nice and squishy for a blanket, but it's not complicated. You just cast down the stitches and you have to go, you know, back and forth until you get the length that you want. And the number of stitches you cast on really depends on how tightly or loosely that you are as a knitter. So I am making this. I do not know if I will actually get this finished. Ideally, I'd love this to be a blanket gift for the holiday season, which we're going to talk a little bit about gift giving, homemade things, handmade things in a little bit here. But I don't know if it will get done or not. And my philosophy with making gifts for other people, this is a philosophy that I have adopted in recent years, just for my sanity, is that if it's too stressful, then I always have a backup plan. So I don't really have a backup plan yet at this time for this particular person, but if it proves to start to be, it's only, what is it today, November 5th, 4th? It's November 4th today. So if it proves to be that I'm not going to get to it and it's going to be too much stress, then I'll think of something else. But this little marker is where I was last time, which, by the way, I love this little marker. Can you see? It's so cute. I have 3 black cats, so, and some of them do have green eyes. At least one of them does. So I love the black cat stitch marker. But I think I cast on like 100 and, it's in my project page, which will be located, the link will be below, but I want to say it was like 160 stitches. And I am using 2 fingering strands held double. I am using a singles base in Barley, which is a Berry Fun Yarns colorway. This is a retired base, but it is a lovely base that maybe someday I will dye again. And then I'm hoping the blanket will be big enough that we'll use a total of 8 skeins. 4 fingering weight skeins in the Barley, which is, I think it's 400 yards to 100 grams. So was that 1,600 yards of that? And that's going to be held throughout the blanket. And then I'm going to switch off as the blanket goes. So my first color was this Hawthorne Knit Picks. And I think it is Mr. Tabber is the, I think that's the colorway. So that was the first one. And that's what I knit for the first, almost the entire piece that you're seeing here. I don't even know if you can see. Tiny bits. You see this part where the purple is starting to come in? Just barely. That is where I'm starting to work in the second color. So, oh, I lost some stitches. Grab those quick so I don't lose them permanently. So I did my pattern in my head. I did 50 grams just to make it more interesting to knit for me, and also just to make it maybe look a little more interesting. I did half the skein of this, so 50 grams, and then I started to work in this. So what I'm going to do is for the next 50 grams of this, so it'll be half of this one as well, I'm going to do every other row. So I have 2 balls of the, there's a lot of yarn management going on, but because it's just garter stitch and it's back and forth, it's working out well. Now you could just use one and go back and forth with your at your brighter colors. But I have found when I have a lot of yarn like this is that these 2 strands, oh, see, I don't even have the right ones together. But the strands kind of get twisted on themselves, if you know what I mean here. So they bond together, they get twisted. So rather than every other round having to untwist those 2, this one from the whatever the main color is and switching to the other main color, I just use 2 skeins. So they're buds. These 2 will be together the whole time, and then there'll be another 2 that'll be together the whole time. So then it just saves my sanity a little bit. But so this is the first one, and then it's going to go to this one, which I think is a Joma yarn, again in my project page. And then I picked another Hawthorne. This one I think is called Alberta Arts. And then let's see if I can get the last one. And then since I came to you last, I did pick out a 4th skein, and that is this one. So it's kind of got some brighter pops of pink and blue. I haven't wound it up yet, but it is a sparkle sock from Lake Knit Yarns, and it's called Cosmic. This is again a yarn that I had in my pretty deep stash from when I used to get Knit Crate subscription, but I think it's got 21% stellina, which I think is crazy. This one also has like 15 or 20%, so it'll be kind of a sparkly blanket, which hopefully the recipient will like. So yeah, so that's where I am on that, and this project is so nice. When my stitches keep falling off. When my cat drama was at its worst in the last week or 2, this was the project that I wanted to knit on because it was just so soothing and relaxing, and I did not have to think about it. I could just sit down and go back and forth. And I'm knitting it on a US 6 needle, which is a very comfortable gauge. It just feels really nice as it goes through your hands. It's not super tight. It's not super small needle. It's not a super large needle. It's just a good kind of middle road sort of project. So, you know, I love to have multiple projects on the needles, but I do like to have the ones that I work on. I like it that they're a little different in like needle size, size of the project, you know, socks, mittens versus a big blanket or a cowl. I kind of like to have kind of a tinier one, a middle one, and then a bigger one. It just sort of, you know, and sometimes the tiny is a size 0 and the big is a size 6. So it just depends what I'm working on, but I find it really helps my hands a lot to vary the size and the feel of the project. It just, I think when you're holding like a heavy weighted sweater on 11, it's different than a sock. And sometimes you just need that change to keep your hands and your muscles and everything feeling comfortable with knitting a long time. Okay, so put my, what's that called? Tape measure back. So when I need it next, I have it. The last work in progress, I can talk, that I have on my needles is a new cast on, and this is the Evia mitts, and it is by, this is not going to be a good picture, so I'll put a better one up on the, it is by Skein Knits. It is like kind of a classic Selbu mitten that she had in her Selbu Mitten Club 2. And they are made with 2 50-gram skeins of DK weight. Now, I am technically using worsted weight, and this yarn is kind of neat and special to me, and I have been wanting to make a pair of mittens or a hat. I hadn't decided, but I was thinking mostly mittens with it for a long time. In the fall of 2019, so almost exactly 3 years ago, my husband and I went to Australia. And of course, I went to a yarn shop there, and I had to get some wool that was sort of local to the area. So I did purchase, not that much actually, I was really good. I purchased a single skein of hand dyed that I've already made into some fingerless mitts. And then I got these Zelana, this one's missing the Zelana Heron. And this is a cool yarn. It's very unique because it is 80% fine merino, but 20% brush-tail possum. And it is from New Zealand, actually. It's technically not from Australia, it's from New Zealand. But in that area of the world, they have issues with possums. They become a nuisance animal, and they can cause havoc. I think maybe similar to like deer can be here around us, where the population gets so much greater than what can be sustained. They get into crops and things. So they do have a hunting time for them, and they get rid of them. I do not know all the details, but they use their fur to make yarn because it actually is supposed to be very warm, and it's actually very soft. And I'm really enjoying knitting with this yarn. In fact, I wish I would have gotten more. I have the honey colorway. And then this is, I think, called bottle green, but it's really dark. It's like a dark turquoise blue green color. And I am making, like I said, the Evia mitts. And I only cast these on just a couple days ago. And darn it, I really need to start using my, what are those called? Needle cozies, because my needles keep falling off, and that is no fun. So let me try this on and I can show you what it looks like. I just got to the part where the thumb gusset is, but isn't that beautiful? It's got like a big snowflake on it. Now, when I made it, I really thought, kind of goes this. This is supposed to kind of go down the side here and the side over here, but it kind of is in a funky spot just because of the needles in it right now. But they aren't supposed to be knit on, the pattern says US 6 and US 4. Well, I thought, well, I'm always a loose knitter, so I started with my typical 2 sizes down. Now, had I been a smart knitter, I would have gauge swatched, but I was like, I'm just gonna go with it. But when I do that, then I do watch. This is sort of like my gauge swatch, and I watched as I was going through the rows. I tried it on, and I was like, is this gonna fit me? Is this too tight? Nope, this feels okay. I'm gonna keep going. But then when I got up to the part of my hand where it widens here, the stitches do increase in number there, but I was like, oh, I think I want it a little bit looser. So I kept going up a needle size. So the beginning part you knit on the smaller needle, and then when you get here, you go up to the main needle gauge size. And I first went up to a 4, and then I was like, that's still a little tight. Then I went to a 5, and finally I ended up with a 6. So, and that is where I really think it feels nice, and it's still looking really nice. And I had thought about ripping them out and starting over again, but I was like, no, they're just for me, and they're going to be warm and cozy. And I increased my stitch gauge so gradually by changing, as I went up, that you really can't tell, and they feel fine on, so I just kept going. The one thing I will say though is if I make another pair of these, which I think I will, because I have tried making sailboom mittens in the past. In fact, I have tried Skein-Deer knits patterns, and I don't know, I tend to mess them up, but you know what? You don't get better unless you practice. Things are not hard, they're new and different. So I think I am going to make another pair of these, and I'm going to start with a 4, or maybe I'll do this ribbing with like a 3 or a 2, because I like it to be, this part seems to kind of flare out a little bit compared to my gauge with my color work. And then I'll go up to the 4 for the bottom and the 6 on the top, and we'll see. But for the second mitt of this pair, I'm going to follow what I did on this one because I want them to fit similarly, so they're a nice pair. But I think it's turning out really well. The pattern page itself actually shows that the snowflake pattern is the darker color, and then so they switched it. So the lighter color would have been where my dark color is, and the darker color would have been here. And I also thought about ripping back and switching it the other way as well, but I have a jacket that is sort of this dark blue color, which is why I picked that as the edging color to start with. So I think it'll be just fine. But like I said, I will probably make another pattern or another pair of these, and I will try it the other way and see if I like it better. So yeah, it's a very well written pattern with some beautiful charts in there. Easy to follow so far. I'm finding it a fun knit. So yeah, I think I only spent about 3, maybe 3 days on this, and not for long periods of time, because I've noticed with color work, if I am going for too long, then I make more mistakes. And I have been using the friction erasable highlighters to kind of highlight my row, and then I erase it when I finish that row and I go on to the next one. And I know there's a knit, what is it called? Knit, it's an app. I am forgetting the name of it, but I'll write it on the screen because I have the app. It's on my recording device that I'm using right now. I'm on my iPad. But I just don't like always having to take a electronic device with me when I go somewhere. So I'm a paper person with the patterns yet. So anyway, so that is the Avia mitts. And I have found my little, this is an oldie, she doesn't make this anymore, Suburban Stitcher. Before she used to dye yarn, she sewed bags and needle cozies. And I am going to pull out that one. put these needles in there so I do not lose them again, because there's nothing worse than losing your stitches when you're trying to do color work. It's the most annoying. All right, I got it all in there nicely. Woo, there it goes. All right, so that is my last work in progress. Okay, so I don't actually have anything new today for In the Die Pots. However, I thought it would be kind of fun and helpful, perhaps, to chat a bit about giving hand knit or hand crocheted items as gifts. And let me grab it. I made a couple notes for myself. So if you are a person who loves to make things, and I'm guessing if you're watching this podcast, you are a person who loves to make things, there is nothing more wonderful in your mind, in my mind, than to give a gift that I have made with love for a person that I love. However, there's lots of things to consider when you choose to knit or crochet or make something for someone else. Because, as we all know, not everyone appreciates handmade items as much as we do. We want to think they do, but the reality of it is that not everybody does. So, I wrote down a few questions as we're entering the gift-giving season coming up, a few questions that you could ask yourself when you are contemplating whether or not to make something for someone else. So, first of all, do they appreciate the time and energy it takes to make something, whether it's to knit it or crochet or even sewing? If they are a maker themselves, the chances are that the answer to this question would be yes. However, if they don't make things themselves, they probably don't understand how many hours can go into making, say, a pair of socks or a scarf or a shawl. I cannot tell you how many times I set up at the farmer's market with my yarn, and random, as I call them, muggles will walk by and ask, oh, did you make your sweater? Can you make me a sweater like that? Can I buy that sweater from you? And I always want to say, look, if you really wanted to buy this sweater from me, first of all, the yarn cost, I don't know, depending on what you purchase, I think this sweater was pretty reasonable. It was probably $50 because it was a Knit Picks Wool of the Andes. But depending if you use a hand-dyed yarn, if you use a more luxurious base like cashmere or yak or silk, if you're making a item for someone who is in the larger size range, you need more yarn. So yarn can cost more than $100 easily just for the yarn. And then you think about how many hours you put into it. This is super bulky weight, this sweater, and I still put lots of hours into it. It knit up relatively fast, especially when you consider maybe I knit 1 to 2 hours a day. It'll go by quickly. But if it takes me 20 hours to make something and the person I'm making it for doesn't appreciate that, then I'd say that maybe think of something else to make them. If you really want to make them something, you can always make them some sort of baked good, or you can do a different sort of crafty item for their house, like a decor item. So thinking of, do they appreciate the time it takes to go into a project? And going along with that time idea is really being honest with yourself. How much time does it really take me to knit a pair of socks? How much time does it really take me to knit a hat? And some of us pay more attention to this than others. I do not always pay attention to this. And I would say this is a struggle I have in general in life. If you ask my husband, he will agree with you, is that I tend to be late for things, or maybe not late, but just barely on time, because I like to think that I can get things done faster than I really can. And when we multitask a lot, so if you're a person who is many projects at one time person, you might not realize how many hours it actually took you to make one item because you've spread it out over multiple items in multiple weeks. So you might think it actually takes you less time. So I'd recommend be honest with yourself and really, if you don't know and you don't want to sit down and make a whole sock to figure out how long it takes you, you could even just knit an inch or two and time yourself to see how long it takes you to do an inch or how long it takes you to do a heel. And then you can multiply that by how many inches you need to knit for this particular project. So once you figure that out, then also figure out, do you really have time to knit this project? Is it going to add more stress to your life? So, for instance, going along with that, is it going to add more stress to your life? When you are choosing to make this item for someone, you are choosing not to do something else by default. So if you really like to go Christmas caroling, or you like to get together with friends to bake cookies, and then you have like a share of cookies, that is maybe 5 hours of your time that maybe you would need to dedicate to making a project, and you wouldn't get to do that. So really think about those things and whether or not it's worth the time to you, or is there something else this person would love to receive that would be just as thoughtful but not cause you so much stress and take you quite as long. Now, of course, we are in November already, so we only have so much time before the end of the year in the gift-giving season. If you really like to do things and you know it's going to take a long time, you can always start them earlier. You could start them in January even. I always think that's kind of not so fun. I'm not really in the mood to start projects for the next year in January. But July, yeah, I would be willing to start a project in July that I want to give in the November, December time frame. So time is a big thing to think about. And then the two other things I had written down that are important to think about if you're going to gift something to someone would be if you've decided that person is knit-worthy or crochet-worthy or project-worthy, then what sort of yarn or fiber do you want for them? So are they a person who would be okay with hand washing an item? Or would they be better with being able to throw it in the washing machine and maybe just lay it flat to dry? So in my world, when I knit gifts for people, if I'm not sure, I know that they're knit-worthy, but I'm not sure what their washing style is, shall we say. What I'll do is I'll make it out of something that can be washed in the washing machine. But I will recommend to them, I'll put on a little care tag to it with care instructions, telling them what the fiber content is and recommending that they lay it flat to dry. Because that's pretty easy. Most people can do that or hang it. It's not a special thing. And if it needs to be hand washed and you think someone would be okay with that, the other thing I think is really nice when you give gifts is to get them a tiny little bottle of wool wash or maybe a Tuft Woolens bar of wool wash and kind of help them. Because if you're not a person who works with merino wool or more luxurious fibers, if that's not your thing, you probably have no idea. In fact, one time I had someone buy a shawl for me and they were going to take it to the dry cleaners. And I was like, oh, please don't do that. Please don't take it to the dry cleaners and put all those chemicals on it. So a little tiny bottle, and I do buy my Eucalyptus wool wash in bulk. And then I get little tiny bottles. You can get little travel size bottles and you can put some in there to share and give that to your person along with their gift and some instructions. And, really, if you're not giving things like socks, you don't really need to wash your hat or your mittens very frequently. So, they don't need to stress so much about that. And that's kind of a nice gift as well, something you don't need to wash frequently if they need to hand wash it. And let's see, was there something else? Oh, yes. The last question I had was that if you are unsure, or maybe you have somebody who's always admired your sweaters and it's a bigger project, or maybe it's even just socks, you could say to them, I've seen that you really seem to enjoy my projects when I make them. I would love to make you a pair of socks or a sweater, but I want it to be something that you will love. So why don't you come over to my house and pick out the yarn you'd like? Or if they're not close to you, you could pull out a couple things. Say, hey, what's your favorite color even? You could start there. And you could work your way through that, picking out colors or yarns, specific yarns. Maybe they are allergic to alpaca. That would be important to know. Also, picking out patterns would be a nice thing, particularly if it's like a sweater. One year I did knit my mom a sweater, and I asked her very specifically, Mom, what colors do you like? And, what style do you like? Do you want it to be fitted? Do you want it like this or like that? And, she's a very sweet person. So she was like, I'm sure I'll like whatever you make, Tanya. And I'm sure she probably would have, because she's a maker and she would have appreciated it, but whether or not she would have worn it is another question. So you want them to be able to wear whatever it is you make. So encourage them to be involved in the process if you are unsure of what they really like. So all that to say, I recommend things like hats, slippers, mittens for gifts, especially if you're starting right now. And bigger things like blankets or sweaters are great as gifts if you have time and it's the right person, or if you start a little bit earlier. So I love to make gifts for other people. I think I've said this before on the podcast. I'm not a never make gifts for people or a always make things for myself person. I am kind of either way. But I have learned from giving things in the past to people who maybe would have liked just a really good book instead of a hand knit pair of mittens. I have learned to think through what I'm making a little bit more. And also, I have started, we'll see if I actually follow through with this year, because I do have some projects. But I have started to tell myself that if it's not finished by December 1st, then it is not a gift for this Christmas. And if it is something, like for instance, I am not beyond putting a pair of unfinished socks wrapped up in a box on the needles and giving them to my immediate family, because they know I will finish them, and when they're done, they're done. So that's sort of my 2 cents on gift giving, hand knit or handmade items. If you all have any thoughts or suggestions as far as things to think about or patterns, whatnot, please be sure to comment below. I would love to chat more about ideas and thoughts that you have about it. But it is something that seems to come up a lot with makers at this time of the year, because we love to share what we love, right? We all love to share what we love. So why not make something for someone else? But it's not always quite that simple. Okay, on those rambling thoughts of gift giving and making, I am going to sign off. I'm going to say thanks so much for joining me today, for being a part of my making babble, so to say. And I hope that I will see you back again here in a couple weeks for another episode. But until then, I hope that you are having a healthy and happy couple weeks, making all the things that bring you joy. So thanks so much. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.